LaSalle was no different from hundreds of other small towns scattered across the South. One main street, dusty roads, and people who knew almost everything about each other. Or thought they did. Charlene Weathers stood behind the counter at Health Pharmacy, mechanically tearing open a box of aspirin for Mrs. Thompson, an elderly lady who came in every Tuesday with the same prescription. "How's your Jaman? Catching any criminals?" Mrs. Thompson asked, carefully counting out the change. Charlene smiled stiffly. Jim Weathers, her husband and the sheriff of Lesabon, was someone everyone respected but few knew personally. "Busy as usual," she replied automatically, the same phrase she had repeated for the past few years. When the store emptied, Charlene allowed herself to glance at her watch. 15 minutes to 5. 45 more minutes and she would be free. Her thoughts carried her away from the dusty pharmacy shelves to the backyard of the abandoned brown house on the outskirts of town, where Darius Smock was waiting for her. Charlene couldn't say exactly how it had started. One day she was just giving her son's friend some medicine, and a week later she was meeting him in secret, like a schoolgirl, forgetting her 45 years, her position as the sheriff's wife and responsible mother. Darius wasn't just young, he was dangerous, and she knew it. Half his body was covered in tattoos. He had a mysterious past that had brought him back to Lesabon, and he looked at her the way Zeman hadn't looked at her in years. "Hey, Mom!" A voice snapped her out of her reverie. Jericho, her 22-year-old son, stood at the entrance to the pharmacy, clutching the strap of his backpack. "I'm back for the weekend." "Jericho!" She quickly came out from behind the counter and hugged her son. "You didn't tell me you were coming." He shrugged, accepting the hug but quickly pulling away. "I wanted to surprise you. Is Dad home?" "No, he's—" Charlene stumped me, probably at the station. "As usual." Jericho's voice sounded slightly bitter. "Is Darius in town?" Charlene felt the blood rush to her cheeks. "Darius?" she asked, too quickly. "How should I know?" "Well, he's my friend, Mom. I thought you might have seen him." Jericho looked at her strangely. "He came back a couple of months ago. Said he found a job here." "Maybe I saw him briefly," Charlene shrugged, trying to sound indifferent. "At the gas station or in a store. He's a tattoo artist now, can you believe it?" Jericho smiled, taking out his phone. "Look, he did this for me last weekend when I was home." He rolled up his sleeve to show off his fresh tattoo, something that looked like a tribal pattern wrapped around his wrist. Charlene felt a chill inside. This was the first she'd heard that Darius was into tattoos, and somewhere deep down she knew it wasn't a legitimate salon with licenses and inspections. "Does your dad know?" was all she could ask. Jericho laughed. "Of course not. You know him. To him, I'm still a kid who needs permission to cross the street." Charlene nodded. The relationship between Zeman and Jericho had never been easy. Too different, too stubborn, they had clashed since Jericho was a child. "I'll be done in half an hour," she said. "You can wait or go home. The keys are in the same place." "I'm going to see Darius," Jericho said, already heading for the door. "He started some kind of studio in Pete's old garage. He calls it Ink Blood." "Pretentious, huh?" When the door closed behind her son, Charlene felt her hands tremble. Ink Blood, in Pete's garage. Now she knew where Darius spent his days, and for some reason that knowledge disturbed her more than it should have. The town was filling with evening shadows when Charlene closed the pharmacy. She told herself she was going home, but the car seemed to turn on its own toward the old garages on the outskirts. Her feet led her to a shabby door with a neon sign that read, Ink Blood. Inside, it smelled of disinfectant and something sweet. Darius sat with his back to the door, leaning over some guy's hand, a machine humming monotonously. "Just a minute," he said without turning around. Charlene looked around. The place was clean as an old garage could be. There were tattoo sketches on the walls, a couch, a few chairs, and a sterilizer in the corner. "Charlene?" Darius finally turned around, and a smile spread across his face. "What a surprise. Jericho was here an hour ago." "I know," she said, nervously clutching her bag. "He showed me his tattoo." Darius nodded to the client, who finished paying and left, leaving them alone. "Do you like it?" He stepped closer to her, too close for someone who was just a family friend. "I did it especially for him." "My son shouldn't have—" she began. Your son is a grown man, Darius interrupted, his fingers brushing her wrist. What are you doing here, Charlene? She wanted to say that she was worried that this place was illegal, that he had no right to work without a license, that Zyman might find out. But instead she said, I need a tattoo. Darius raised an eyebrow in surprise. You? The sheriff's wife with a tattoo? A small one, she said, lowering her eyes, where no one will see it, except you. His laugh was quiet, almost predatory. You're a brave woman. What would you like? Charlene didn't know. She hadn't planned it. But now, standing there, she felt the need to do something reckless, something that would connect her to this young man who made her heart beat faster. Something that means freedom, she finally said. Darius ran his finger along her collarbone. I know the perfect place, and the perfect design. At that moment, Charlene thought of Zimani, sitting in the station filling out reports, unaware that his wife was about to let another man leave a mark on her skin. She should have felt guilty, but instead she felt only exciting anticipation. When can we do it? She asked. Right now? Darius locked the door and turned the sign to closed. Take off your blouse. Charlene knew she should leave, but instead, her fingers began to unbutton it. While Darius prepared his tools, she remembered how he had come to the pharmacy 5 months ago asking for a job. They got talking, and a week later they met at a cafe. Another week later, he kissed her in a supermarket parking lot, and they had been seeing each other in secret ever since. An abandoned house, a motel in a neighboring town, once even in the pharmacy office after closing. It was madness. She was 45, he was 25, and he was her son's friend. But after 20 years of marriage to a man who saw her more as part of the furniture than as a woman, madness was exactly what she needed. Ready? Darius's voice brought her back to reality. She was lying on the couch, naked from the waist up, covered only by a napkin. Yes, she whispered. The pain from the needle was sharp and clean. Darius worked silently, only occasionally asking if everything was okay. She looked at his hands, covered in his own tattoos, and thought that Zeman would never understand. Almost done, he said after half an hour. It looks great on you. He handed her a mirror, and she saw a small bird flying out of a cage right under her collarbone, where her breasts began. It was a place usually hidden by clothing, but intimate enough to remind her of him with every breath. It's beautiful, she said, feeling a strange relief, as if something inside her had been set free. So are you. Darius leaned down and kissed her, not caring that the door could open at any moment. When she got dressed, he explained how to care for the tattoo, gave her some ointment, and told her not to get the area wet for a few days. See you tomorrow? He asked, walking her to the door. I'll try, she smiled, feeling a slight tingling sensation under her blouse where the little bird was now. Jericho is home for the weekend. Say hi to the sheriff, he said with a hint of mockery in his voice that made her shudder. At home, Charlene found a note from Jericho saying he had gone out with friends and would be back late. Zeman was late for work, as usual. She took a shower, carefully avoiding her new tattoo, and looked at herself in the mirror for the first time in a long time, 45 years old, once an attractive woman, now with the first wrinkles and tired eyes. What did Darius see in her? What did she see in him, besides youth and forbidden fruit? Dinner was on the table when Darius came home. He nodded to her, sat down silently and began to eat, as he had done every evening for the past 20 years. A tall, still strong man with short-cropped graying hair and a face that seemed permanently frozen in an expression of professional alertness. Jericho's here, she said. He's with friends. Zeman nodded, not looking up from his plate. Work at the station? She asked, even though she knew she would get only a one-word answer. Paperwork, he said, as usual. They ate in silence, which had once been cozy but now felt like a tomb. Charlene thought about the tattoo under her blouse, about Darius's hands on her skin, about how easy it had been to betray the man sitting across from her, who had once been her world. I made a doctor's appointment, she said, not knowing why she was even mentioning it. Just a routine checkup. Monday. Okay. Zeman finally looked at her. Are you okay? For a moment, something like concern flashed in his eyes, and Charlene felt a pang of guilt. Yeah, just a checkup, she smiled. I haven't been to the doctor in a while. He nodded and went back to his food. 2 days later, she was sitting in the office of Dr. Higgins, her local therapist, who had known her since childhood. The usual examination, the usual questions, the usual tests. Everything was as usual, except for the tattoo under her blouse, which she carefully concealed, reminding her that she was no longer the Charlene Withers who had come here a year ago. We'll call you with the results next week, Dr. Higgins said as he said goodbye. But I'm sure everything is fine. The week passed with the usual chores, the pharmacy, the house, secret meetings with Darius whenever the opportunity arose. Jericho returned to college, promising to come back in a month. Zeman, as always, was lost in his work. The call from the clinic caught her at the pharmacy. The voice of Nurse Labisha Green, her longtime friend, sounded strangely tense. Charlene, you need to come in. Today, if you can. Is something wrong? She asked, feeling a chill inside. Dr. Higgins wants to talk to you, Labisha replied evasively. Just come in. Dr. Higgins's office seemed smaller than usual. He sat at his desk with a serious expression, a folder with her name on it in front of him. Charlene, he began, and she knew the news was bad. I have some difficult results. She sat motionless as he spoke in medical terms that gradually formed into a simple and terrifying truth. Her HIV test was positive. It's a mistake, were her first words. It has to be a mistake. We double-checked, Dr. Higgins said gently. I'm very sorry, Charlene. We need to discuss the next steps. Treatment started on time. His words seemed to float through the air. Charlene thought about Zeman, about Jericho, about her job at the pharmacy, about the town where everyone knew everything. And then she thought about Darius and his underground tattoo parlor. How? She interrupted the doctor. How could I have gotten infected? Dr. Higgins paused. Charlene, you know how it's transmitted. Unprotected sex, contact with blood. A tattoo, she whispered. I got a tattoo. Dr. Higgins looked surprised. Where? He asked. Which parlor? Charlene closed her eyes. Ink blood in Pete's garage. Unsterile needles. Darius, who didn't know, or worse, knew and didn't tell her. It doesn't matter, she said. What do I do now? For the next hour, she listened to talk about medication, monitoring, lifestyle, about how it wasn't a death sentence, how with modern therapy she could live a long and full life, about confidentiality and support. When she left the office, Labisha was waiting in the hallway. Charlene, she said, hugging her friend. I'm so sorry. Do you know? Asked Charlene. Labisha nodded. I saw the results, but no one else knows, and no one will find out from me. Charlene squeezed her hand gratefully. I have to go, she said. I need to think. Leaving the clinic, she got into her car but didn't start the engine. Her thoughts were jumbled. HIV. In a small town where everyone knew each other, it was worse than leprosy, and there could only be one source. Darius. Either through the tattoo or... She closed her eyes, remembering their encounters. They hadn't always been careful. She had trusted him. Her hand reached for her phone. She had to call Darius to find out if he knew. And then... What then? Tell Zeman? Hide it? How could she live with this? Charlene started the car. First, she had to talk to Darius. Maybe he didn't know anything. Maybe it was all a terrible accident. But deep down, she felt that nothing in Lisbon was accidental, especially when it came to the secrets its residents kept. Charlene had been sitting in her car opposite Inkblood for 20 minutes. The neon sign flashed in the twilight, casting reddish reflections on the windshield. The lights were on inside. She could see the silhouette of Darius leaning over another customer. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. HIV, 3 letters that now defined her entire life. 3 letters that meant fear, stigma, and a secret even bigger than her affair with Darius. She replayed her conversation with Dr. Higgins in her head. Modern therapy, normal life expectancy, confidentiality. It all sounded like words from a movie she had watched while sitting on the couch with Zeman, never suspecting that one day those words would be directed at her. The door of Inkblood opened, and a young guy with a bandaged shoulder came out. Trevor Jones. She knew him. He worked at a gas station and had recently gotten married. Now he was also Darius's client. I wonder if he knows what risk he just took. Charlene waited until Trevor drove away before getting out of the car. Her legs felt like jelly, and her mouth was dry. She pushed open the door to the salon. Darius was wiping down the couch where the client had just been lying. Hearing the door open, he turned around and a smile spread across his face. Charlene. He said her name with a warmth that made her stomach flutter. I wasn't expecting you today. Is Zeman on duty? She didn't answer, just stood there looking at him. Young, handsome, with tattoos covering his arms and neck, and that same smile that used to make her heart beat faster. Did you know? She finally asked, her voice barely audible. Darius frowned and put down the rag. Knew what? About your HIV status, she said louder than she had intended. Did you know when you gave me my tattoo? When we were together? There was a long silence. Something like shock flashed across Darius's face, then confusion, then concern. What are you talking about? He took a step toward her. I don't have HIV. I do. Charlene's voice trembled. I just found out. And the only way I could have gotten it is from you. Either through the tattoo or... She didn't finish her sentence. Darius froze, then slowly shook his head. That's impossible, he said. I'm clean, Charlene. I got tested 6 months ago before I came back to Lisbon. Then explain it to me. She was on the verge of tears. Explain how a woman who has been faithful to her husband for 20 years suddenly gets HIV? Darius ran his hand over his face, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an answer. I don't know, he admitted. I really don't know, but I swear to you, I'm clean. Your tools, Charlene nodded toward the table where the machines, needles, and paints lay. Do you sterilize them? Darius looked at her with resentment. Of course I sterilize them. I'm not an idiot, Charlene. But you don't have a license. She took a step forward. This salon is illegal. Do you use disposable needles? Darius paused, then sighed. Not always, he admitted. Sometimes you have to save money, but I sterilize them, I swear, in an autoclave. Charlene felt the ground slip away beneath her feet. She leaned against the wall to keep from falling. Who was before me? She asked. Who did you tattoo before me? Darius furrowed his brow, trying to remember. Ray Forrester, he said. The guy from the auto shop. Charlene knew Ray, a quiet man in his 30s who fixed cars and, according to rumors, had had some trouble with the law in the past. And you used the same needles? Darius didn't answer, and that was answer enough. Oh my God, Darius. Charlene covered her face with her hands. Do you realize what you've done? You could have infected not only me, but everyone who came here. Listen, he approached her, trying to take her hands, but she pulled away. I'll get tested again. Today, and we'll figure everything out. We? Charlene smiled bitterly. There is no we anymore, Darius. It's over. She turned to leave, but he grabbed her arm. Charlene, please, I love you. The words that were supposed to move her now sounded like a mockery. Don't you dare talk to me about love, she pulled her arm away. You ruined my life. Stepping out of the salon, Charlene breathed in the cool evening air. She didn't cry. It was too late for tears. Her mind was racing with thoughts of Zimani, of Jericho, of how she would explain all this to them. Or not explain it. Maybe it would be better to keep it a secret, like her relationship with Darius. Live with this disease in silence, swallowing pills, and pretending that everything was fine. The phone in her bag vibrated. It was Labisha. Charlene took a deep breath and answered. I just talked to him, she said without waiting for a greeting. Darius? Labisha's voice sounded tense. What did he say? That he didn't know. Charlene got into the car. That he got tested 6 months ago. That he sterilizes his instruments but doesn't always use disposable needles. Charlene, Labisha paused. You have to tell Zeman. Not about you and Darius, but about the salon. It's dangerous for the whole town. I know, Charlene started the car, but I can't. Not now. Then I'll tell him, Labisha said firmly. As a nurse, I have a duty to report things like this. Give me some time, Charlene asked. At least until tomorrow. I need to think. After a pause, Labisha agreed and Charlene hung up. She sat in the car, not moving. The clock on the dashboard showed it was almost 10 o'clock. Jiman was probably already home, waiting for her with dinner. How would she look him in the eye? When she got home, Charlene found a note on the refrigerator. "Called to the station. Don't wait up." She felt relieved. Another night's delay before the inevitable conversation. Although perhaps there would be no conversation. Perhaps she would simply keep this secret, just as she had kept the secret of her affair. Charlene took a shower, carefully avoiding looking at the tattoo under her collarbone, a bird flying out of a cage. How ironic. Now she was locked in a cage worse than any other. The morning brought news that made her blood run cold. Labisha's call woke her at 7 in the morning. "Turn on the TV," her friend said instead of saying hello. "Channel 7. Still half asleep, Charlene went down to the living room and turned on the TV. The local news showed police cars at an old warehouse on the outskirts of town. The reporter spoke of a shocking murder, a brutal attack, and an investigation being led by Sheriff Weathers himself. "Who?" she asked into the phone. "Ray Forrester," Labisha replied. "He was found at dawn today. Ziman has been at the scene since 4 in the morning. Charlene felt the room begin to spin. Ray Forrester, the same man Darius had mentioned, the man whose needles she could have used for her tattoo. How did this happen? Her voice was barely audible. "He was beaten to death," Labisha said quietly, though it was unlikely anyone could hear her. But before that, Charlene, the word infected, was carved into his chest. Charlene sank onto the sofa, feeling nauseous. "Do you think it's related to—" "I don't know," Labisha interrupted. "But it's too strange a coincidence. Ray came to the clinic 2 weeks ago. He tested positive for HIV. "Oh my God," Charlene closed her eyes. "Do you think it was him? Maybe," Labisha sighed. "Listen, we need to talk. Not on the phone. I'll pick you up at lunchtime, okay?" Charlene agreed and hung up. The news continued to show reports from the crime scene. The camera caught a glimpse of Zeman, tall, grim, giving instructions to his assistants. He looked tired but focused, doing his job as always. The doorbell rang, and Charlene flinched. Through the peephole she saw Darius, pale, with dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same clothes as yesterday. "Go away," she said through the door. "Zeman could be back any minute." "I need to talk to you," his voice was hoarse. "It's important. It's about Ray." Charlene hesitated. Then she opened the door, but didn't let him in. "Have you seen the news?" Darius nodded. "I was the last person to see him alive," he said. "After you left, he came to the salon. He wanted another tattoo." "And?" Charlene crossed her arms over her chest. "He was acting strange." Darius looked around, as if afraid someone was listening. "He was talking about some test, about how his life was over, that he was an outcast now." "He knew about his diagnosis," Charlene said quietly, "and he probably knew he got it from your dirty needles." Darius shook his head. "No, Charlene. He knew long before that. He said he'd been sick for over a year." Charlene froze. "What?" "He was drunk and angry," Darius continued. "He said that now everyone would know the truth about him, about how he lived, who he slept with, that everything was ruined." "Wait," Charlene frowned. "If he's known about his status for a year?" "Exactly." Darius stared at her intently. "He could have deliberately infected people, Charlene, through my salon." The thought was so horrible that Charlene didn't immediately grasp it fully. "You're saying he—" "I don't know for sure," Darius lowered his head, "but he came every week. He always asked to use his favorite machine, and he always left with a cut or a scratch, as if he wanted to leave blood on the tools." Charlene leaned against the doorframe, feeling her legs give way beneath her. "You have to tell Zeman," she said. "Everything, except about us." "And end up behind bars for running an illegal salon?" Darius smiled bitterly. "I've packed my things. I'm leaving tonight." "You can't just leave!" Charlene exclaimed. "A man is dead. And how many more people are infected because of your salon?" "It's not my fault," Darius said desperately. "I didn't know." "Ignorance is no excuse," she shook her head. "If you don't go to Zeman, I will." Darius looked at her for a long time. And tell him everything? About us too? Charlene didn't answer. They both knew she couldn't. I'll get tested, Darius finally said. And I'll call all the clients anonymously. I'll tell them to check themselves out. And then? And then I'll disappear. He lowered his eyes. It'll be better for everyone. Charlene wanted to say something, but at that moment, Ziman's car appeared on the driveway. Darius quickly backed away. I'm sorry, he said, for everything. And he disappeared around the corner of the house before Charlene could respond. Ziman looked exhausted. He nodded to his wife as he entered the house and immediately headed for the shower. Charlene watched him go, feeling a strange mixture of guilt, fear, and relief that he was too busy to notice her state. When he came out of the shower, she set a cup of coffee in front of him. I saw the news, she said. That's awful. Ziman nodded, sipping his coffee. I've never seen anything like it, he said. Not even in a big city. Someone really hated that guy. Are there any suspects? Charlene asked cautiously. Ziman shook his head. Not yet, but we'll find them. A killer always leaves clues. He said it with such confidence that Charlene shuddered involuntarily. What do you mean, infected? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The reporter mentioned that word. Ziman looked at her for a long time. Forrester was HIV positive, he said finally. We got that information from Dr. Higgins. Medical confidentiality is not usually disclosed, but in the case of murder... I understand. Charlene felt the blood rush to her cheeks. That's terrible. What's terrible is that he knew his status and continued to have promiscuous sex, Ziman said with disgust in his voice. According to his neighbors, he had a steady stream of visitors. Men, women. He could have infected dozens. Charlene remained silent, afraid that any word would give her away. But that's no reason to kill him, added Ziman, standing up. I'm going back to the station. Don't wait up for me. He left without even kissing her, but that had been the norm for many years. Charlene was left alone, her thoughts tangled in her head like a ball of snakes. Ray Forrester knew his status. He could have deliberately infected others, her. And now he was dead, with that terrible word carved into his chest. Labisha picked her up at lunchtime. They went to a cafe in a neighboring town where no one knew them. Ziman knows about Ray's status, Charlene said as they sat down at a table in the far corner. Dr. Higgins told him. Labisha nodded. After the murder, we were required to provide all medical records. And about me, Charlene faltered. Does he know about me? No, Labisha shook her head. That's a different case. Your status remains confidential unless I'm the next victim, Charlene smiled bitterly. Don't say that, Labisha covered her hand with hers. Listen, I need to tell you something about Ray. Charlene looked up. What? He came to the clinic regularly, Labisha began, for medication, and he often complained about discrimination, about how impossible it was to live with HIV in a small town, that everyone would find out and judge him. I understand, Charlene nodded. But the last time he came in, Labisha lowered her voice, he was furious. He said someone in town knew about his status and was blackmailing him, threatening to tell everyone. Charlene froze. Who? He didn't say, Labisha shook her head, but he was very scared and angry. Do you think it's connected to the murder? I don't know, Labisha sighed. But I think you should be careful, Charlene. If someone killed Ray because of his status, then I could be next, Charlene finished. But no one knows about my status except you, Dr. Higgins, and Darius. And maybe whoever was blackmailing Ray, Labisha added. They sat in silence, thinking about the situation. What are you going to do? Labisha finally asked. About Ziman? About his treatment? I don't know, Charlene replied honestly. I don't even know how I'm going to live with this knowledge. How am I going to look Jericho in the eye when he comes back? You're strong, Labisha squeezed her hand. You'll be fine, and I'll always be here for you. Charlene smiled gratefully, but inside she felt only emptiness. Strong? A woman who cheated on her husband with her son's friend, contracted HIV, and now had to hide it all? When she got home, Charlene saw a police car outside her house. It wasn't Zamano. It was his deputy, Ron Johnson. Ron was standing at the door, talking to her neighbor, Mrs. Peabody, who was gesturing animatedly. "Charlene," Ron called out to her as she got out of Labisha's car. "Good thing you're back. I have a few questions." Charlene's heart skipped a beat. "What happened?" "Mrs. Peabody saw a young man at your house this morning," Ron said. "Tattoos, dark clothes. She says it was Darius Smook, your son's friend." Charlene felt the ground slip away beneath her feet. Labisha squeezed her elbow tightly, supporting her. "Yes, it was Darius," Charlene confirmed, trying to sound calm. "He asked if Jericho was home. And what did you tell him?" Ron took out his notebook. "That Jericho is at college and won't be back for another month," Charlene swallowed. "What happened? Is Darius suspected of something?" "We're questioning everyone who was connected to Ray Forrester," Ron replied evasively. "Miss Peabody says she saw Darius at Forrester's house several times." "Darius knows a lot of people in town," Labisha interjected. "He just got back and is reconnecting with people." Ron nodded, writing something down. "And one more thing." He looked up at Charlene. "Did you know that Darius runs an illegal tattoo parlor? Inkblood in Pete's old garage?" Charlene froze. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Labisha tense up. I heard from Jericho that he does tattoos," she said cautiously. "But I didn't know it was illegal." "We got an anonymous tip," Ron said. "Someone reported that the salon was violating health codes. Given the circumstances of Forrester's death—" He didn't finish, but she understood. "Do you think Darius is connected to the murder?" Charlene asked, feeling her heart pound in her chest. "We're not accusing anyone," Ron said, closing his notebook. "We're just gathering information. If you see Darius, tell him Sheriff Weathers would like to talk to him." When Ron left, Charlene felt her legs give way. Labisha helped her into the house and sat her down on the sofa. "Who could have called?" Charlene asked. "Who knew about the salon?" "Half the town," Labisha sighed. "This is Lesabon. Everyone knows everything here." "But right now," Charlene shook her head, "after Ray's murder, it's not a coincidence. Do you think someone is trying to frame Darius? Or me?" Charlene said quietly. "What if someone knows about us, about my diagnosis?" Labisha shook her head. "That's paranoia, Charlene. No one knows. And no one knows about your connection to Darius except me." But Charlene wasn't so sure. In a small town, secrets have a way of becoming public knowledge sooner or later. If someone saw them together, if someone guessed. "I'm scared, Labisha," she admitted. "Not just because of HIV, because of everything. The murder, the investigation. Everything will be fine," Labisha hugged her. "We'll get through this." But in her friend's eyes, Charlene saw the same fear she felt herself. Because they both knew that in Lesbon, secrets don't live long, and someone had already begun to reveal them, one by one, in the most terrifying way possible. 3 days after Ray Forrester's murder, Lesabon was in a strange state of paralysis. People whispered, locked their doors, and looked suspiciously at their neighbors. Nothing like this had ever happened in their town before. Charlene watched these changes from the pharmacy window, mechanically dispensing medicine and answering questions from customers who seemed to be coming in more for gossip than for medication. "They say they can't find that tattoo artist, Darius," whispered Mrs. Thompson, leaning over the counter. "He ran away as soon as people started talking about his salon." Charlene nodded, trying not to show her emotions. Darius had indeed disappeared. His phone wasn't answering, and ink blood was sealed off by the police. Zyman hadn't mentioned the investigation at home, but she saw him working around the clock, coming back only to shower and change. "Sheriff Withers will find the culprit," she said, handing Mrs. Thompson her usual aspirin. "He always does." When the customer left, Charlene allowed herself a moment of weakness. She leaned against the wall of the back room and closed her eyes. Fear never left her for a moment. Fear that Zeman would find out about her affair with Darius. Fear that her diagnosis would become known to the whole town. Fear that Ray's killer might come after her. The phone in her pocket vibrated. A message from Labisha. "We need to talk. It's important. Come to the clinic after work." Charlene felt her pulse quicken. Labisha wouldn't write like that unless it was really serious. She closed the pharmacy at 5 o'clock and drove straight to the clinic. Labisha was waiting for her at the back entrance, looking around nervously. "What's wrong?" Charlene asked as soon as she approached her friend. "Not here," Labisha shook her head. "Let's go to my office." The small nurse's office smelled of antiseptic and coffee. Labisha locked the door and lowered the blinds. "Ziman was here today," she said without preamble. "He requested a list of everyone who has been tested for HIV in the last 3 months. Charlene's breath caught in her throat. "He can't. That's confidential information. He's a sheriff, and he has a warrant," Labisha said, sitting down on a chair. "He's investigating a murder, Charlene, and he's found a connection between Ray, his HIV status, and the tattoo parlor. My name?" Charlene couldn't finish her question. "I managed to get your card out," Labisha said quietly. "But it's only a temporary solution. If the investigation continues in this direction, he'll find out sooner or later." Charlene felt weak in her legs and sank into a chair opposite her friend. "I have to tell him," she said. "You should, before he finds out from someone else." Labisha nodded. "And there's something else," she paused. "Ziman is looking for Darius. He's the prime suspect. They have a witness who saw him near Ray's house on the night of the murder." "That's impossible." Charlene shook her head. "Darius couldn't have—" "I'm not saying he did it," Labisha interrupted. "But the evidence points to him. And Charlene, Ziman found something in the salon, something that connects Darius to Ray and to other people in town." "What exactly?" Labisha lowered her eyes. "I don't know for sure. But according to the medical examiner, Ray wasn't the only HIV-positive client at the salon. There were others. It's as if the salon was deliberately attracting these people." Charlene remembered Darius's words about Ray possibly infecting others on purpose with unsterilized tools. "You think Darius was in on it? Did he deliberately spread the infection?" "I don't know," Labisha sighed. "But this is getting serious. And you're right in the middle of it, Charlene. As one of the infected, as a woman connected to Darius, as the sheriff's wife," Charlene added bitterly. At that moment, there was a knock at the door, and both women started. "Labisha?" The voice behind the door belonged to Dr. Higgins. "Are you there? Sheriff Weathers is back. He wants to talk to you." Labisha and Charlene exchanged frightened glances. "Just a minute!" Labisha shouted. Then, lowering her voice, she quickly said to Charlene, "Get out through the back door. I'll delay them." Charlene squeezed her friend's hand. "Thank you. For everything. Go." Labisha pushed her toward the back door. "And be careful." Sliding out of the clinic through the back door, Charlene quickly made her way to her car. Her hands were shaking so badly that she could barely put the key in the ignition. She had to talk to Ziman. Today. Tell him everything, or at least about her diagnosis, before he found out from the medical records. But Ziman wasn't home, even though his car was in the driveway. Charlene entered the house, calling her husband, but got no answer. His keys and holster with his gun were lying on the kitchen table. Ziman never left his weapon at home. Something was wrong. Going upstairs, she froze in the doorway of their bedroom. Ziman was standing with his back to the door, holding a small bottle of ointment that Darius had given her to care for his tattoo. Next to him on the bed was a folder with documents. "Ziman?" Her voice trembled. He turned slowly. His face was stony, his eyes cold and distant. "When were you going to tell me?" he asked quietly. Charlene felt the blood drain from her face. "What?" "The tattoo," he said, picking up the bottle of ointment. "The fact that you were a client of Inkblood, that you're on the list of people who have to take an HIV test." "Ziman, I can explain. Can you?" His voice remained calm, but there was steel in it. "Then explain why the sheriff's wife is hiding information that's important to a murder investigation. Why my wife goes to an underground tattoo parlor instead of a licensed one. Why my son and his friend are involved in spreading a deadly infection." "Jericho?" Charlene grabbed the doorframe. "What does Jericho have to do with this?" Ziman nodded toward the folder. "We checked Darius's phone. There are messages from Jericho discussing how to lure people to the parlor, how to use it as a cover for something bigger." "That's impossible," Charlene whispered. "Jericho couldn't—" "My own son," Ziman shook his head. "I always knew he had problems, that he didn't respect the law, but this This is a crime. Charlene took a step forward. Ziman, please listen to me. I got a tattoo, yes. It was stupid, a moment of weakness. But I didn't know anything about the other things going on at the salon, and Jericho couldn't have been involved in anything like that. Then why did you hide it? Zeman looked her straight in the eye. Why didn't you come to me when the investigation started? When you found out Ray was HIV positive? Charlene lowered her eyes. She couldn't tell him the truth. Not all of it. Not now. I was afraid, she said. Afraid you'd be angry about the tattoo, that you'd judge me. And that's why you went to Darius Smoke? For the first time, there was emotion in his voice, anger mixed with pain. To our son's friend? I didn't know he was dangerous. She looked up. I didn't know his salon was connected to anything criminal. Ziman looked at her for a long time, as if seeing her for the first time. I want to know the whole truth, Charlene, he said finally. Why did you go to that salon? Why Darius? The moment of truth had arrived, and Charlene realized there was no turning back. She had to tell at least part of the truth. I knew him, she said, not just as Jericho's friend. We were seeing each other. Seeing each other. Zeman said the words with such irony that Charlene flinched. How exactly were you seeing each other, Charlene? Not what you think, she shook her head, even though she knew she was lying. We just talked. He would come to the pharmacy, and we would chat. I was lonely, Zeman. You're always at work. We hardly speak to each other, even though we've known each other for years. Something flickered across Zeman's face, perhaps a glimmer of understanding or regret. But it vanished immediately, replaced by his professional mask. I need to see your tattoo, he said, for the investigation. We found records at the salon with detailed descriptions of every tattoo, every client. Charlene froze. Had Darius really written down the details of their meetings? Was he that careless or that thoughtful? Okay, she said after a pause. Slowly unbuttoning the top buttons of her blouse, she exposed her collarbone and the small tattoo beneath it, a bird flying out of a cage. Zeman stepped closer, examining the design with clinical interest. September work, he said. According to the records, this tattoo was done on September 27th. Do you remember who else was in the salon that day? Charlene shook her head. Only Darius. He closed the salon when I arrived. And before you? Zeman insisted. Did he mention the previous customer? Ray Forrester, Charlene said quietly. He said Ray was here before me. Zeman nodded, as if confirming his suspicions. And he used the same needles, he said, not as a question but as a statement. Charlene felt a chill run down her spine. How do you know that? Because that's how the whole scheme worked. Zeman moved away from the window. The salon wasn't just an underground business. It was a place where HIV was deliberately spread among a certain group of people. What? Charlene felt her legs buckle. Why would anyone do that? Revenge, Zeman replied curtly. Ray was the first. He got infected about a year ago from a partner who didn't tell him about his status. And he decided to take revenge not only on that person but on everyone who, in his opinion, deserved the same fate. But what does Darius have to do with it? Charlene didn't understand. Why would he help Ray? Money, Zeman shrugged. Or maybe he had a score to settle with one of the victims. We're still figuring that out. But one thing is clear. Darius and Ray were working together. And Jericho may have been with them, too. No, Charlene shook her head. Not Jericho. He couldn't have known. At that moment, the front door downstairs slammed, and they heard Jericho's voice. Mom? Dad, are you home? Charlene and Zeman exchanged glances. Their son, who was supposed to be at college, had somehow ended up here, in the middle of an investigation he might be involved in. We're upstairs, Zeman called, keeping his eyes on his wife. They heard Jericho climbing the stairs. His footsteps sounded heavier than usual, as if he were carrying something heavy. When he appeared in the bedroom doorway, both parents froze. Their son looked exhausted, his eyes red from lack of sleep, and his stubble, which he usually shaved carefully, was visible. You know, don't you? He asked, looking at his father. About Darius and me? Zeman straightened up, his hand instinctively reaching for his belt, where his holster usually hung. What exactly do I know, Jericho? His voice was calm, but Charlene knew that tone. It was how Zeman spoke to suspects. Jericho looked at his mother, and something like accusation flashed in his eyes. You didn't tell him, did you? He asked. About you and Darius? Charlene felt the ground slip away beneath her feet. Zeman turned sharply toward her, his face pale. What is he talking about, Jericho? She doesn't know what I know, Jericho continued, walking into the room. But I saw you, at Ink Blood, and before that, behind the pharmacy. You weren't exactly hiding. Charlene couldn't say a word. Zeman looked at her, and in his eyes she saw 20 years of marriage crumble into dust. Zeman, she finally managed. I can explain. You slept with our son's friend? His voice was quiet, but every word hit like a whip. All this time, while I was looking for the killer, you were hiding your relationship with the prime suspect? It's not what you think, Jericho interrupted. Darius didn't kill Ray. I did. The room seemed to freeze. Both parents stared at their son, unable to believe their ears. What did you say? Zeman took a step toward his son. I killed Ray Forrester, Jericho repeated calmly, because he infected Darius, and Darius infected Mom. Charlene pressed her hand to her mouth, feeling as if she were about to faint. You know? She whispered. Jericho nodded. Darius told me everything when he got his test results. He was desperate. He said Ray was deliberately infecting people through the salon, that he was using him behind his back. And then I found out you were there too, Mom, that you were infected too. And you decided to kill a man? Zeman looked at his son as if he were a stranger. My son is a murderer? I was protecting my family, Jericho said, his voice hardening, making him sound so much like his father. It's what you taught me my whole life. Ray was a monster. He deliberately spread a deadly disease. He deserved to die. No one deserves vigilante justice. Zeman shook his head. That's what the law is for. That's what I'm here for. The law? Jericho smiled bitterly. What would the law do? Put him away for a couple of years? Then he'd get out and continue infecting innocent people. No, the only way to stop him was the way I chose. Charlene looked at her son, not recognizing him. When had her little boy turned into a man capable of murder? How could she not have noticed the change? Jericho? She took a step toward him. Why did you come back? Why are you confessing now? Because they're looking for Darius, he replied. Because all the evidence points to him, and he's innocent. He's a victim, just like you, Mom. Then why did he run away? Asked Jimin. Because I asked him to, Jericho lowered his eyes. I knew you would find evidence linking him to Ray. I knew he would become the prime suspect, and I wanted him to be safe until I figured out what to do. And now you've made your decision, Zeman nodded affirmatively, and you've come to confess. I came to protect an innocent man, Jericho corrected him, and to tell the truth, the whole truth, about Ray, about the salon, about everything. Charlene looked at her husband and son, feeling her world crumble. Her infidelity, her illness, her son's crime, everything was tangled up in a terrible knot that was impossible to untangle. What will happen now? She asked quietly. Zeman looked at his son for a long time, then at his wife. In his eyes, a sense of duty and love for his family were fighting, and it was unclear which would win. You're coming with me to the police station, he finally said to Jericho, and you're going to make an official statement, and then we'll see what we can do. You'll defend him? There was hope in Charlene's voice. Despite what he did? I'll defend the truth, Zeman replied, no matter how bitter it is, even if it destroys our family, even if it destroys me. He turned to his son. Do you have proof that Ray deliberately infected people? Something concrete that can be presented in court? Jericho nodded. His diary. I took it from his house the night of the murder. It's all there. Names, dates, even his motives. He kept a record of every revenge he carried out, as he called it. Where is the diary now? Asked Zeman. With Darius. Jericho lowered his eyes. I gave it to him before he left, in case I got caught, as insurance for him. Zeman sighed deeply. You need to contact him. Ask him to come back with the diary. It could help you in court. What about me? Charlene asked quietly. With my diagnosis? You need to start treatment. Zaman looked at her with sadness in his eyes. The rest, we'll discuss later. Can you forgive me? Her voice trembled. Zaman was silent for a long time, and in that silence, it was as if they could hear the crackling of their crumbling marriage. I don't know, he finally said, but Jericho is more important right now. His future. Charlene nodded. Despite everything that had happened, they were still parents, and right now, their son needed them more than ever. As he headed for the door with Jericho, Zeman turned back to his wife. Come to the station too, he said. We need your statement about the salon, about Darius, everything you know. She nodded, realizing that this would mean publicly revealing all her secrets, her affair, her illness, her lies. I'll come, she said. I won't hide anymore. When they left, Charlene sank onto the bed, feeling a strange sense of relief. The secrets she had kept so carefully had been revealed, and although it had destroyed her life, there was a kind of cleansing truth in it. She no longer had to lie, pretend, or live in fear. She looked at the tattoo in the mirror, a bird flying out of a cage, a symbol of freedom that had become a symbol of her downfall, but perhaps also of redemption. Because sometimes, in order to truly be free, you have to lose everything first. Charlene picked up her phone and dialed Labisha's number. I'm going to the police station, she said when her friend answered, to tell them the whole truth. I'll be with you, Labisha replied. You're not alone. Remember that. As she left the house, Charlene took one last look at the life she had lived for 20 years. A loveless marriage, secrets, lies, all of that was behind her now. Ahead of her lay uncertainty, perhaps even public disgrace, but also the truth. And the truth, no matter how bitter, was still better than the sweetest lie. The city of Lissabon continued to live its life, unaware of the drama unfolding in the sheriff's family. But soon, everyone would find out. Soon the truth would come out, bright and merciless, like a brand burned into the skin, and everyone would have to bear their own brand, their own responsibility for their actions. For Charlene, this journey was just beginning, a path of redemption that might one day lead her to forgiveness, if not from others, then at least from herself.